You're listening to The Jeff Crilley Show on Talk Radio 1190.
Welcome back to The Jeff Crilley Show. How many parents can identify with this? You got that sweet little boy and girl, and they're just being so respectful and mind you and all that stuff. And then the teenage years hit, and then all of a sudden they are not listening to anything you say. My next guest is Kim Muench. She is a parenting expert, and she has a website called reallifeparentguide.com. Welcome to the Jeff Crilley Show.
Jeff, thank you for having me this morning. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, so tell us where this all was born for you. How did you become a parenting expert? How did this all start?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I think it starts with the fact that I am the mother of 5 children between the ages of 10 and 30.
You look great.
Oh, thank you. And, so 30 years almost of experience in August. My oldest will be 30. And I was a teen mom, so I became a parent very early. And I did initially I think a lot of parenting the way my parents parented me. And then those things didn't work any longer, especially as my kids got to their adolescent, years. I wanted to create the kind of relationship with my kids that when they grew up, they wanted to come home and they wanted to, not a friendship, but a mutual respectful relationship. So I started to do some things differently, and now I coach other parents to do into that same kind of relationship with their kids.
Do you think it's gotten more difficult to parent over the years? I mean, do you think our grandparents had it easier in a way than we do?
I will go with what my mom says, and she's always like, Kim, I'm so glad that I'm done parenting, at this point. I watch what you and your brothers go through to raise your children today, and I wouldn't want anything to do with it. I don't know if that's a natural thing, if just one generation to the next, that's the way they do it. But I do think that we have a lot of messages and a lot of anxiety in general in society that contributes to some family dysfunction, and I do think it's more challenging to raise kids today.
Well, maybe I'm thinking of Leave It to Beaver or something, but it seems like, when in the 50s, maybe the kid got caught smoking cigarettes and, got in trouble at school or something like that. And these days with the internet, it just seems like you're one click away from all kinds of trouble.
That's true. That is true. But I think social media in general is a mixed blessing. In fact, I have a son that just went to Dublin yesterday, and he Snapchatted me this morning, and I knew that he got there safely. So there are pluses and there are minuses to social media. And I think parenting in general, whether it's about social media or things like drugs or these big challenges that come up during the teen years, it's about finding a balance and working with your child and not trying to control or parent over your child. The older they get, the more we have to kind of pull back on our desire for them and allow them to really come through.
Let's talk about parenting styles, because I know if I had to describe my parenting style, I'm the best friend parent. I'm the one that I want my kids to love me, and so I'm not a disciplinarian. And of course, my wife, then that becomes her role, which is never fun, to be the bad cop. What's your advice to people? I mean, should you just fall into your natural style, or should you resist your natural inclinations?
I think there's a lot of value in looking back at our own raising to think about what worked and what didn't work. Maybe where you felt heard as a child and where you wished your parents had done something different. And to proceed in a way that makes the changes where necessary. As parents, we want to protect and we want to have our kids be happy all the time. And the reality is kids can't be happy all the time. Life is not happy all the time. And so we put into place, especially when our kids are adolescents, boundaries and safeties for them, but also give them as many choices as we can. Like I try and do that with my kids. We have bedtime, and the phone has to be in the kitchen at 9:30 at night. These are non-negotiable. But whether or not you want to participate in this particular sport, or if you want to go to this camp instead of that camp, as many choices as I can give them, I want to do that as well, so they can kind of figure out who they are and what their path is.
I know that we hear about helicopter parenting, and now I heard there's a new expression, lawnmower parenting, and that's where you're flying so low to the ground that you are just cutting down the grass. But I do feel like, Kim, sometimes we don't allow our children to fail. We don't, we want them to succeed, and so we don't allow them to skin their knee. And there's some value in falling down, isn't there?
Absolutely. Jessica Leahy wrote a book called The Gift of Failure, and it is an excellent resource for parents to really understand the value in allowing your kids to trip and fall sometimes. This is in our challenges in life, that's where we grow. And if we never allow our children to have challenges, then they can't ever become resilient or self-reliant. And that's why we have a problem with, kids getting to college and not being able to really take care of themselves because too much has been done for them.
Right. And I've been talking to different teachers, and they say, the parents don't back them up. And, in the 50s and 60s, if the kid got out of line and the teacher called home, you're in trouble. And now there's a lot of parents that will fight the teacher or go over the teacher's head to the principal. I mean, do you think, is there an epidemic of people not just kind of practicing respect? Do you know what I mean? That there's I have a friend who is heads up a large referee association in Texas. It's the largest referee association. And he says, we're having trouble getting referees because they're getting yelled at all the time by the parents.
I can see, I myself, I have a son that does taekwondo, and he's at a basketball establishment where there's a ton of parents, and I see this all the time. So I totally understand what you're saying. Do I think it's an epidemic? Epidemic is a strong word, but I do think there is a problem. And I've always operated from the idea that the teacher and the principal, they have their jobs, they know what they're doing. And if someone called me and said, that my child had done this or that or whatever, first of all, I would talk to my child about it. But I would certainly, I think to back the teacher and to back the administration where our kids go to school is an important thing to do. You have to realize sometimes when your kids, you think your kid would never do that.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, especially during adolescence when their brain, and there's a lot of risk factors and the brain is changing or whatever, they may do some things that you would never expect them to do, especially if they're with their peers. Because, kids with their peers definitely take bigger risks. I know that I did as a teenager.
All right, tell us about reallifeparentguide.com. Tell us what the site is designed to do.
Okay, so reallifeparentguide.com, which is just one L, is my blog I've been writing for several years now. And I write about different aspects of parenting adolescents. It also talks about the services that I offer. I work with parents of kids middle school age and older who want to look within themselves a little bit, look back at their own raising, learn about where they might have some limiting beliefs that are being played out in their parent-child relationship now. I work hourly with people. I work as a package, and I do a whole program as well. So parents that are really struggling with their kids and are wanting to or willing to look within themselves to help the situation, those are the parents that I'm looking for.
That's cool. And you're also working on a book. Are you at liberty to talk about it?
I am working on a book/coaching program called Let's Do This Together. And that's actually the landing page for the website as well. I'm very much about wanting to help parents partner with their teenager as opposed to over. Because the more we try to control and the more we come from a place of fear instead of a connection, the more resistance we get from our kids. And they might comply for a little while, but in the end, you're not going to have the kind of relationship with your children when they're grown that that we all hope to have.
Do kids want boundaries?
I believe they do. I think that kids also want choices. So again, it's finding the balance between putting in some safety measures for them, some boundaries around their sleep, their nutrition, their free time, their screen time. But then in any other avenue, giving them some choices.
Right. So let's talk about, like a common one, and this goes back generations, is curfew.
Okay.
You know, what's, you have a 17-year-old daughter. What's her curfew?
Well, at my house, it would be midnight.
Okay.
That's just the way it is. My mom always said nothing good ever happens after midnight, and she was right.
And if,
I know this.
If your teenage daughter says, "But Mom, everybody else is staying out until 1 and 2, I look like a loser," what do you say?
I think part of being a conscious parent is having the courage to not worry about what anybody else says, thinks, including your daughter's friends or their parents or anybody else. You know, that you really keep in mind your own children and their paths, and have the strength to be able to say something like, "It's midnight. End of story. It's midnight."
I know there are some parents that will just track their kids. They'll say, "Okay, you've got a car, but there's also GPS on that car, and I will always know where you are. So if I call you and ask you where you are, don't lie to me because I'm going to know." What do you think about that? Is that overreaching?
I am not in favor of that. I don't do that with my own children. That gets to be a cat and mouse game. Okay, that just brings in the sneakiness, right? If we don't, our kids, if we want to have a trusting relationship, they have to trust us, and we have to trust them. And I am not about tracking my kids. And I look at their social media occasionally, especially my daughter, who's my youngest. Absolutely. But it's to have ongoing conversations about things that we're worried about she might get into on social media, as opposed to this idea of, I've got to track everywhere you are and everything you're doing. I want to build a relationship with my kids that they can really come to me with their challenges, and that they wouldn't be sneaky. Because I know myself as a teenager, I was sneaky, and that was
Right.
part of the way, because of the way I was parented.
Yeah. Kim, you're a great guest. We'll have you back after the book is out.
Wonderful.
RealLifeParentGuide.com is the website. Pam Muench, my guest. When we come back, we're going to be talking about wellness. Everybody's talking about healthcare reform and what to do when people get sick. Let's talk about wellness. That's next on The Jeff Crilley Show.
More of The Jeff Crilley Show coming up.